Looking for an alternative place to find news and opinion? How about conversing with fellow patriots? Join us Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for Cold War Radio. You will find it at www.spreaker.com or in the Spreaker app. Search for Cold War Radio and you will find it. Since I've been listening, I have met some terrific patriots and learned quite a lot about current events that the mainstream media will never tell you. Please come and join us. Be inspired. You will feel right at home in our Spreaker chat room.
Ladies and gentlemen, China trade economic analyst Jack Hanney is CEO and senior partner at Patriot Gold Group and nationally recognized expert in trade, commerce, and markets. Born and growing up in Westchester County, New York, where his father was a successful politician and owner of an insurance brokerage firm, Jack began subscribing to the Wall Street Journal at the age of 14 and moved to California in his early 20s to study under William O'Neill, arguably the single most successful investor in the history of markets and founder of Investors Business Daily and author of How to Make Money in Stocks. Mr. Hanney, welcome to Cold War Radio. I'm Hutch Bailey Jr. and my co-host in Pittsburgh, Ward Miller. Good evening.
Good evening there, Hutch, and thank you for having me on.
I guess initially the most important thing going on right now concerning the economy and things of that nature, monetary policy and whatnot, is the president and his administration's elevation of trade negotiators and treasury secretaries and commerce secretaries and the like to almost field general rank, putting them on the international stage. What are your thoughts concerning the president's trying to wrest back a balance with China concerning our economy?
Well, reason being that they've been elevated is never before have the American public paid as close attention to interest rates in the Fed as they do now. We have the Fed Open Market Committee meeting tomorrow and Wednesday, in which it's widely anticipated that the Feds will be cutting interest rates a half a basis point. Trump has been demanding the Feds to cut interest rates to zero or less. Reason being the European Central Bank, Swiss National Bank, and the Bank of Japan have all committed to keeping rates negative. So with the trade wars and tariffs and with a slowdown in the macroeconomic community and the GDP of China and Japan as well as Europe, most economies have now committed to keeping rates negative, whereas Jerome Powell and the Feds have raised rates 6 times in Trump's presidency.
Do you think that's political? Because I do.
I do as well. In fact, look at the previous administration. They initiated a third round of quantitative easing right before the election for Obama to give the impression of the economy doing well to reassure his reelection. And Trump gets elected and the Feds start raising rates. They've raised them 6 times in 18 months. So now they're forced to cut rates again. And in order for us to maintain our, competitive trade advantage globally, we have to cut interest rates.
So it looks to me, from following different people that I respect as far as the economy, it's not my strongest suit. But it looks to me like the president and his adjustments, they're more than adjustments. It seems like we're moving from a Wall Street economy where globalists are successful, but the American middle class is left behind, into a more of a Main Street economy where goods are starting to be manufactured again, and you have the energy extraction successes that are really turning tables around. Do you agree with that? And what is the most important thing that you think that's on your radar as far as this whole interaction with China, the emerging economy that seems to have a knack for stealing intellectual property and requiring proprietary sacrifices from companies that start their manufacturing in China. Am I making any sense? Or
well, that's just it. I do not believe that this trade war will be resolved ahead of the 2020 election.
Oh, I don't know.
At all. And it's imperative that Trump stand firm, as we know he will. Now, Trump is definitely trying to bring manufacturing back to the states. But in the near term, the trade war, the tariffs with China, it's going to cause quite a bit of volatility for the stock markets. And the last time the Feds cut interest rates back in 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011, we watched as gold and silver shot up 70 and 80%. Gold was at $1,900 an ounce, and silver went from $17 to $49 an ounce. So right now, what we're looking at average Americans, retail investors, hedging their positions with the stock market, preparing for the uncertainty ahead because of the trade wars and tariffs with China, because of negative interest rates abroad, and the Fed's cutting rates, and we're probably heading back to zero. But prior to bringing manufacturing jobs back and really, restructuring our economy and building our economy, there's going to definitely be quite a bit of volatility ahead in this trade war and these tariffs with China.
Mr. Hanney, this is Ward Miller. My question is going to be pretty simple. It's do you view the trade war that President Trump's, and I hate to say started, but engaged in with China to be a good thing or a bad thing for the economy, and why?
Well, it's not that he's engaged in, it's that previous administrations for the last 3 to 4 decades have allowed for China to steal our intellectual property. So no other administration would stand up to China. Trump found it imperative to stand up to China. I think a lot of it may have to do with 5G coming out. And China's been stealing our technological intellectual property for the last 3 decades. So he's the only, president and the only administration that would stand up to China. So it's actually necessary that, an administration finally stand up to China. It's not obviously going to be the most celebrated or, mainstream media, of course, would like to point out the volatility in the stock market and how it'll cost the American consumer an additional $1,000 a year. But we have to eventually stand up to China.
Well, how can Americans hedge their bets against the dollar or the stock markets while this volatile situation shakes out?
That's just it. Right now you look at gold having surpassed a 6-year high. Silver is up 35% in just the last 3 months. We have the highest number of IRA applications in process since our inception, and most retail investors right now are rotating out of paper-denominated assets in the stock market with all 3 indexes simultaneously at stratospheric all-time highs, and into gold and silver while they're still at multi-year lows. So this opportunity right now in gold and silver is quite possibly the single best investment opportunity I've seen in the last 20 years.
And what is silver at right now again?
Silver's at 18 right now, but 2.5 months ago it was in the mid-14s.
I know. 5 years ago when I bought it, it was 26.
Well, what happened was when the Feds cut rates back in 2010, silver went from 17 to 49 in 6 months.
I wish I was paying attention.
Well, you're paying attention now. The Feds are cutting rates on Wednesday. Jerome Powell and the Feds will probably cut interest rates by 0.5 basis point.
All right.
So you have another opportunity here to get into silver at 18. and most anticipate it to surpass $50 an ounce within the next 18 to 24 months.
All right. Now, let me ask something kind of a little bit like along the same lines as what I was talking before, because I'm trying to put this in layman's terms a little bit. And I just recently retired. And my mindset, and please let me know if I'm nuts, but it seems to me the last 20 years, I'm also, and the show is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so we've seen the globalist economy, the ugliness of that right in our face since about 1980. Our entire existence changed in 1980. And I just wonder, it seems to me that now, with Trump at the helm, and the idea that, this globalism isn't really what it was cracked up to be, it seems like we're actually making things now. In other words, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I think the biggest thing that we made in the United States was websites. But when you have... Go ahead.
The unfortunate thing is this. One thing I do want to say, my sincerest condolences on Roethlisberger being out for the season, to everyone there in Pittsburgh.
It was time.
But a few things to look at here. Since 2000, had you put $100,000 in the S&P, you'd have $137,000 today. If you put $100,000 in the Dow, you'd have $187,000 today. Had you put $100,000 into gold, you'd have $447,000 today.
Wow.
And if you put $100,000 into silver, you'd have $377,000 today. But we have to keep in mind with technological advances, right? Do you know the largest real estate holder in the world is Airbnb, and it holds no real estate? Okay? Isn't that concerning? The largest transportation company in the world doesn't own a single automobile. It's Uber. The single largest marketplace in the world has zero inventory. It's Amazon. So due to technological advances, it's going to be very difficult to see our GDP grow beyond 3% because of Silicon Valley and technological advances. The reality is it's a changing economy. And when you really think about it, the largest hotel in the entire world, the most rooms rented out in the entire world, has no real estate. You have to really start altering your mindset on your investment strategies. And
isn't that kind of like creating a bubble?
Well, we're right now in what's called the everything bubble. If you look at the subprime auto loans, remember all the commercials that we were watching, 0% down, 0% APR for 72 months, 6 years.
That's 73rd month's a killer, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, what happens is everyone walks onto a lot, drives off in a car, realizes the car's 30% less than, what they just previously, purchased it for at 0% APR with no money down. 3 years out, the warranties run out. The car's only worth 30% of its value, and they still owe 70% of the car, so they walk away from it. You also have the student loan debt, where we're $1.5 trillion in debt, and we both know those millennials are never paying back these student loans.
They can't even tell you when the War of 1812 was fought.
Hey, look, that's the unfortunate reality is we're in the everything bubble now. Real estate, housing, credit, corporate debt, student loan debt, the subprime auto loan, and when the everything bubble bursts, we're in the perfect storm right now for safe haven assets, gold and silver.
And let me just be honest with everybody listening. You are the CEO of the California-based Patriot Gold Group, which I imagine is probably doing very well right now. And that's there's nothing wrong with that. Talk a little bit about China's yuan, and it's slumping to an 11-year low because we're being told that they're a currency manipulator. Explain what that really means.
Well, the yuan right now, China, keep in mind, its economy right now is at about a 30-year low. It's entering into a recession. The yuan is at an 11-year low. But what they have introduced is the petro yuan and the Shanghai exchange, in which the yuan can be easily convertible into gold. As we know, China and Russia right now are stockpiling massive stratospheric positions of gold to move away from the U.S. dollar. They're also selling U.S. treasuries and liquidating U.S. treasuries, and they're the largest holder of U.S. debt. But what they're doing is they're significantly devaluing and debasing the yuan to remain competitive in the global marketplace despite the tariffs that this administration's imposed on it. So if you impose 25, 30% tariffs, and then you significantly devalue and debase your currency, it offsets the tariffs that were imposed by this administration.
So,
all of us know that China really has no concern for the Chinese people, and we all are familiar with the humanitarian crises there. So
70 million starved by Mao.
There you go.
You know,
and President Xi doesn't have an election coming up in 2020, and that's one of the reasons why this trade war and these tariffs, I really find that it's going to be extremely difficult to get them to the table, and they're certainly never going to forego stealing our intellectual property. No way.
Jack, what happened to the yen? You know, I hear the yuan. Wasn't it the yen? Did they change their currency or just the pronunciation of the word?
Well, no, that's the Japanese yen. So Japan's currency is the yen, and the Chinese currency is the yuan.
Got it.
But the frightening thing is this: the more that we significantly devalue and debase our own currency, it's going the way of the yuan and the yen. And J.P. Morgan just stated about 6 weeks ago that the U.S. dollar could lose its dominant reserve currency status. And that was at one time just a conspiracy theorist. It was a fringe theory. But the truth of the matter is that has now gone mainstream.
Oh, I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I mean, when we were under the Obama administration, our credit rating was knocked down. I thought it was going to happen then.
Well, and then all that he did was go and quadruple our money supply. Think about it.
I know.
They printed $4.5 trillion. Do you know what that's done to the value of the U.S. dollar? You go to the grocery store now, you can see.
And that's a very good point. And just my, with my layman economic experience, you can buy a flat screen TV for $300, but try to buy a side of beef.
Hey, look, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and a jar of peanut butter is now $6.99. A loaf of bread is $4.99. The dozen organic eggs that she insists on eating are, $5.49.
Yeah.
You can't walk out of the grocery store with 2 bags of groceries for under $100.
And the sad part about it, or actually, it's not sad. It's alarming, is the amount of Chinese ownership of United States agriculture. I mean, Smithfield bacon is owned by the Chinese government. Man, that's my favorite bacon. But that's another story, and we'll talk about that. But finally, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, again, a field marshal on the international stage. Finally, we have money people in charge of negotiations. I mean, that's a huge thing that hasn't happened. You said that this trade war has been going on. It's been going on since Nixon traded Peking for Hanoi. When Nixon,
we had Mnuchin and we had Gary Cohn, both Goldman Sachs and
Lighthizer.
Architects of Trump's tax reform and economic policy.
So Mnuchin said if China agrees to a fair and balanced relationship, the U.S. would sign that deal in a second. How would you define a fair and balanced relationship? Because I don't think
they have to, in some way, commit to no longer stealing our intellectual property, which they'll never do because their entire economy depends on it. So, and he knows that's the case too. What they're trying to do, Mnuchin, with that statement, is trying to calm the markets. That's it. That's all he's doing, is trying to calm the markets ahead of 2020.
And let me just explain to the listeners what stealing intellectual property really means, because a lot of these terms, you hear them floated around, and, people hear them, but they don't necessarily connect what it means. What it is especially with software. You have software updates. Every time you buy something software-oriented, they always give you a way to update the software because they're continually, making upgrades and patches and things like that. Well, when you sell 1 million copies of a certain type of software and 5 million requests come in for updates, that's how they know that the intellectual property has been stolen. Does that sound accurate, sir?
It is. We have the brightest and most brilliant minds in Silicon Valley. You look at Steve Jobs, you look at Apple, you look at Elon Musk, and what happens is China just replicates, steals, and duplicates, I should say, our intellectual property, and then produces it for pennies on the dollar. And that's how their entire economy thrives. It's why we're seeing $300 flat screen televisions, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So.
No question. Jack Hanney, did I pronounce the last name properly?
Yes, Hanney. Yes.
CEO and senior partner at Patriot Gold Group. Can you, any last comments you'd like to talk to the audience about or places you'd like them to go possibly?
Well, keep a close eye on the markets. Keep a close eye on the FOMC meeting tomorrow and Wednesday. Please go to www.patriotgoldgroup.com. Again, that's patriotgoldgroup.com, or give us a call at 1-800-974-4653. But on Wednesday, Jerome Powell and the Fed should be cutting interest rates a 0.5 basis point. And believe me, this is your opportunity to get into gold and silver in the first inning of a historic bull market.
Again, sir, thank you very much for coming on Cold War Radio. I hope to have you back sometime. You're a wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate you coming on.
Hutch,
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Thank you both very much, and you two have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Both. Thank you.
Jack Hanney, ladies and gentlemen. This is Cold War Radio. Ward Miller on my wing, and I'm Hutch Bailey Jr. Good interview. Cold War Radio.